What happens when the weakest wolf in a pack becomes the one thing that could save them all? For Alara Morven, the answer was simple. Nothing. Nothing ever happened to her. She was Omega, the lowest rank in the Silver Crest Pack, invisible except when someone needed a target for their cruelty. She cleaned. She served. She kept her eyes down and her wolf silent, buried so deep inside her that sometimes she wondered if it existed at all. The mate bond, that sacred thread the moon goddess wove between destined souls, was something she'd dreamed about in secret, a fantasy as distant as the stars. But when Alpha Damon Blackthorn rejected her in front of the entire pack, severing their bond with words that cut deeper than claws, everything changed, and what happens next, no one was prepared for. The harvest moon ceremony should have been beautiful. Silver Crest's central clearing was lit with hundreds of candles, their flames dancing in the autumn wind. Every wolf in the pack had gathered, dressed in ceremonial whites and silvers, to witness Alpha Damon claim his mate and solidify his rule. The scent of pine and wood smoke hung heavy in the air, mixed with the electric anticipation of 200 wolves waiting for their leader to complete the most sacred of bonds. Alara stood at the edge of the crowd, as she always did. She wore her only decent dress, a simple gray thing that had belonged to her mother, and tried to make herself invisible. The mate pull had started 3 days ago, a golden thread tugging at her chest, leading her inexorably toward the platform where Damon stood. She'd tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself it was imagination, because alphas didn't bond with omegas. It didn't happen. It couldn't happen, but the moon goddess had other plans. Damon's scent hit her first. Ancient forest, smoldering embers, ozone before a storm, and cold steel. It wrapped around her like smoke, and her wolf, dormant for so long, suddenly stirred. The golden thread blazed to life, visible only to her, stretching from her heart to his. Then Damon's head snapped toward her, his eyes, ice blue and merciless, locked onto hers across the crowd. She watched his nostrils flare, saw recognition flash across his face, and then something far worse. Disgust. "No," he said, the single word carrying across the sudden silence. "Absolutely not." The crowd parted like water, wolves stepping aside to create a clear path between them. Alara's hands shook. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but the mate bond held her frozen, pulling her forward even as her mind begged her to flee. "Come here, Omega." Damon's voice was alpha command, laced with power that forced her feet to move against her will. She climbed the platform steps, each one feeling like walking to an execution. Up close, he was devastating. 6.5 feet of pure muscle, his dark hair falling across a face carved from granite and cruelty. The scent of embers intensified, tinged now with something acrid. Anger. "The moon goddess has made a mistake," Damon announced to the assembled pack. His voice echoed off the trees. "I am Alpha of Silver Crest. I will not be bound to weakness. I will not shame my bloodline with an Omega mate." Alara's wolf whimpered inside her, a sound so broken it made her chest ache. "Please," she whispered, hating herself for begging, "please don't. I, Damon Blackthorn, Alpha of the Silver Crest Pack, reject you, Alara Morven, as my mate." The formal words fell like stones. "I sever this bond. I cast you from my side. You are nothing to me." The pain came instantly. The golden thread didn't just break, it exploded. Fire raced through every nerve, burning her from the inside out. Alara collapsed, her scream shattering the night. It felt like her soul was being torn in half, every cell in her body rejecting the severance of something that should have been eternal. The scent of lavender and morning dew that always clung to her turned bitter, wilting like flowers in a frost. Through the agony she heard gasps from the crowd. Someone's mother covered their child's eyes. Others turned away, unable to watch, but most simply stared, their faces a mix of pity and relief that it wasn't them on that platform. "Remove her," Damon said coldly, already turning away. "And someone find me a real Luna, one worthy of this pack." Strong hands grabbed Alara's arms, pack warriors, their faces carefully blank. They hauled her to her feet even though she couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop the sobs that ripped from her throat. The world spun in colors too bright and sounds too loud. The bond's death throes were still tearing through her, and she thought she might actually die from it. Some part of her hoped she would. They dragged her past rows of silent wolves. No one met her eyes, no one stepped forward to help. The scent of their collective judgment, cinnamon and iron, sharp and condemning, filled her nose until she thought she'd choke on it. Her parents stood near the back. Olara's eyes found her mother's face, searching desperately for comfort, for love, for anything. But Mara Morven looked away, her lips pressed into a thin line. Beside her, Olara's father Thomas crossed his arms, his expression hard. "Mama," Olara's voice broke on the word. "Papa, please." "You brought this on yourself," her father said, his voice carrying just loud enough for those nearby to hear. The scent of shame rolled off him, acrid and thick. "We told you to know your place. We told you." The warriors didn't stop. They carried her past the pack house, past the training grounds, all the way to the border where Silvercrest territory ended and the wild forest began. Winter was coming early this year. The first snow had already fallen in the mountains, and the temperature was dropping fast. Olara had no coat, no supplies, nothing but the thin dress and the shoes on her feet. "You have until dawn to be gone," one of the warriors said, not unkindly. He was young, barely 20, and there was apology in his eyes even if he wouldn't voice it. "After that, if you're found on packlands, you'll be killed as a rogue." They left her there at the boundary stones, ancient markers carved with runes that glowed faintly in the darkness. The moment she crossed them, she felt the pack bond, already weakened by her low rank, snap completely. The loss of it was another knife to the chest, another piece of her soul carved away. Olara walked. She didn't know where she was going. Her body moved on autopilot while her mind fractured into 1,000 screaming pieces. The forest was dark, the canopy blocking out even the moonlight that should have guided her. Branches caught at her dress, tearing the fabric. Rocks cut her feet through her thin shoes. She barely noticed. The temperature dropped steadily. Her breath came out in white clouds. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, not a packmate, but something wild and hungry. The sound should have terrified her, but she felt nothing. Just cold. Just empty. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time had stopped meaning anything. The trees grew denser, the underbrush thicker, and then the storm hit. It started as sleet, ice needles that stung her exposed skin. Within minutes, it became a full blizzard, wind howling through the trees with a fury that matched the chaos inside her. Snow fell so thick she couldn't see 3 feet ahead. The temperature plummeted. Olara's legs gave out. She fell to her knees in the snow, her dress soaked through, her entire body shaking with cold that went bone deep. Her fingers had gone numb, her lips were blue. Hypothermia was setting in, and some distant part of her brain recognized that she was dying. She should shift. Her wolf form would be warmer, would survive longer, but when she reached for that inner presence, she found nothing. The wolf that had stirred so briefly at the ceremony was gone. Again, retreating so far into her soul, she couldn't touch it. The bond severing had broken something fundamental, and without her wolf, she was just a human girl freezing to death in a blizzard. Through the swirling snow, she saw a shape, dark and angular against the white. A structure. Olara crawled toward it on hands and knees, ice crusting her eyelashes, her movements growing slower with each passing second. It was a barn, ancient and half-collapsed, but the roof still held on one side. She dragged herself inside, out of the wind, and curled into the smallest ball she could manage in a pile of rotting hay. This is it, she thought. This is how I die, alone, unwanted, forgotten. And maybe that was for the best. Maybe she'd been a mistake from the beginning. Maybe Damon was right to reject her. Maybe her parents were right to turn away. Maybe she was nothing, nobody, a wolf without a wolf, and the world would be better off without warmth. Olara's eyes flew open. She hadn't even realized she'd closed them. The barn was darker now. How long had she been unconscious? But there was heat pressing against her back, and her side, and her front. She was surrounded. Her vision swam as she tried to focus. Massive shapes moved in the darkness, and the scent hit her all at once. Aged oak, winter snow, pine and storm, so strong it cut through the numbness. Wolves. But not just any wolves. These were huge, far larger than any pack wolf she'd ever seen. Their body heat wrapped around her like a blanket, and slowly, agonizingly, feeling began to return to her limbs. 1, 2, 3. She counted them as her eyes adjusted. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 massive wolves formed a protective circle around her, their bodies blocking the wind that whistled through gaps in the barn walls. Their fur was darker than midnight, and even in the shadows, she could see they were magnificent, each easily twice the size of Silvercrest's largest warriors. They'd saved her. These strangers had found her dying in the snow and used their own bodies to keep her alive. The largest one, the one directly in front of her, his massive head level with her shoulder even though she was sitting, opened eyes that glowed like molten silver in the darkness. The scent of aged oak and winter snow intensified, and Alara realized it was coming from him. He shouldn't shift. Not in this cold, not when keeping her warm required fur and mass. But he did anyway. The transformation was like nothing she'd ever witnessed, utterly silent, fluid as water, bones and muscle reshaping without a single crack or pop. And when it finished, a man knelt before her. He was older than Damon, maybe mid-30s, with silver threaded through his dark hair. Scars crossed his face and torso, not recent wounds, but old marks of survival. His eyes were the same molten silver as his wolf form, and they studied her with an intensity that should have been frightening. But all she felt was safe, protected, seen. "Easy, little one," he said, his voice like aged whiskey and smoke. "You're safe now. We've got you." "Who?" Her voice came out as a croak. "How did you—" "We've been waiting for you." A smile touched his scarred face, transforming it from harsh to beautiful. "My name is Cale Stoneheart, and these are my brothers in arms, the Unchained Guard. And you, Alara Morven, are the one we've been searching for." Her mind couldn't process this. She was freezing, broken, dying. None of this made sense. "I don't understand." "You will." Kyle shrugged out of a heavy cloak she hadn't noticed him wearing. How had he had a cloak? And wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like safety. "But first, you need to survive. Can you drink?" He produced a flask from somewhere, and when he tipped it to her lips, herbal tea flooded her mouth, sweet and hot and laced with something that sent immediate warmth flooding through her veins. Magic. The tea was spelled. "How—" she started again. Questions later. Rest now. Cale's hand touched her forehead gently, and power pulsed through the contact, not aggressive or controlling, but soothing, like a lullaby made tangible. "Sleep, Alara. When you wake, we'll explain everything. I promise you this. You will never be unwanted again. You will never be alone again. You are not nothing. You never were." The words broke something inside her, or maybe fixed something. Either way, tears streamed down her frozen cheeks as her eyes drifted closed. The wolves pressed closer, sharing their heat, and for the first time in her life, Alara felt truly protected. She slept. When she woke, it was to the sound of crackling fire and hushed male voices speaking in tones too low for her to make out words. The scent of cooking meat made her stomach clench with sudden desperate hunger. How long since she'd eaten? Days, maybe. Omegas ate last in Silver Crest, and there were many nights she'd gone to bed with nothing. Alara opened her eyes. The barn looked different in daylight. More ruins than shelter, really, with massive holes in the walls and collapsed sections exposing the sky. But someone had built a fire in the center, well away from any remaining hay, and stretched canvas overhead to keep the snow out. 9 men sat around the fire, and one massive black wolf stood guard at the entrance. They noticed her stirring immediately. 9 pairs of eyes turned to her, and the variety of their scents hit her all at once, distinct and powerful, each one unique. The wolf at the entrance shifted, becoming the 10th man, and Alara recognized Cale's scarred face. "You're awake," he said, relief clear in his voice. "Good. We were beginning to worry." "How long?" 2 days. A younger man with kind eyes and the scent of warm bread and honey spoke up. "You were in bad shape. Hypothermia, malnutrition, and the bond severing did some serious damage. I'm Marcus, by the way. I have some healing ability. Not much, but enough to help." 2 days. She'd been unconscious for 2 days, and these strangers had cared for her. Alara sat up slowly, the cloak still wrapped around her shoulders. Someone had replaced her torn dress with warm clothes, soft wool pants, and a thick tunic that smelled of pine and cedar. They'd even given her fur-lined boots. "Why?" The question came out barely above a whisper. "Why help me? You don't even know me." "But we do." Kyle moved closer, settling on the ground a respectful distance away. The others remained by the fire, giving them space but clearly listening. "We've known about you for years, been searching for you for months. When we felt the bond severing, we knew where to find you. The prophecy." "What prophecy?" Alara's hands shook. Nothing made sense. She was nobody. Nothing. Just an Omega who couldn't even shift properly. Kyle exchanged looks with his men. Then he began to speak, his voice taking on the cadence of something memorized long ago. "When the harvest moon bleeds silver and the weakest wolf is cast aside, the matriarch will rise. She will be born of sorrow, forged in rejection, crowned in power long denied. She will come when darkness gathers, when corruption grows in sacred places, when the strong forget mercy and the weak forget their strength. She will be marked by the scent of dawn's first light, and 10 sworn swords will guard her rise. She will bring the old ways back, or watch the wolf-kind fall." The words hung in the air like smoke. Alara shook her head. "That's not me. It can't be. I'm nothing. I don't even have a wolf." "Your wolf is there," Marcus spoke gently. "It's just been suppressed. Someone bound your power when you were very young. We could smell it on you the moment we found you. Magic, old and complex, woven through your very bones." "Bound?" The word didn't make sense. "By who? Why?" "That," Kyle said carefully, "is something only your parents can answer." Her parents, the ones who'd turned away, the ones who'd let her be cast out to die. Alara's chest tightened. "They did this? My own parents?" "We don't know for certain. But the binding, it had to be done when you were an infant, and it had to be done by family blood." Kyle's silver eyes held sympathy. "Someone was afraid of what you'd become." The implications crashed over her like waves. Everything, her entire life, the weakness, the inability to shift, the Omega designation, all of it was a lie. A cage built by the people who should have protected her most. The rejection, Marcus continued, likely shattered some of the binding. Strong emotional trauma can crack magical barriers. That's why we came when we felt it. We knew you'd need us. But I still can't shift. I still can't feel my wolf." Kyle smiled, and it was fierce and proud. "Yet. You can't feel her yet. But you will. The binding is breaking, Alara. We can smell it, the magic unraveling. Day by day, your wolf isn't gone. She's waking up." As if his words were a summons, something stirred deep in Alara's chest, not the broken, whimpering presence from before, but something vast and ancient, something that had been sleeping for a very, very long time. "Hello, little human," a voice said in her mind, feminine and powerful, layered with harmonics that made Alara's bones vibrate. "I've been waiting so long to speak with you," Alara gasped. I can hear her. I can hear my wolf." Every man around that fire stood up. The scent of shock and excitement flooded the air, pine and cedar mixing with warm bread and honey, with leather and steel, with earth and rain, each distinct, each powerful. "What's she saying?" Kyle demanded, but his voice was gentle despite the urgency. "Tell them," her wolf purred, "that the daughter of the moon sends her regards. Tell them the matriarch has awakened, and tell them it's time I was free." Power exploded through Alara's body. It started in her chest, a supernova of energy that burned away the last threads of binding magic like cobwebs in flame. She felt them snap one by one, each severance releasing more power, more strength, more of herself than she'd ever known existed. The scent of lavender and morning dew intensified until it filled the entire barn, but now it was laced with something else. Moonlight. Pure, liquid moonlight. "Everyone back," Kyle ordered, and his men obeyed instantly, moving to the barn's perimeter. But none of them left. They all wanted to see this. The transformation began. Alara had seen hundreds of shifts in her life. They were always violent, bones breaking and reforming, skin tearing to make way for fur, screams of pain as human became wolf. But this was nothing like that. Her bones didn't break, they flowed. She felt her skeleton restructure like water finding a new shape, utterly painless, almost pleasurable. Power sang through every cell, rewriting her at the most fundamental level. Her hands elongated, fingers becoming paws tipped with claws that gleamed like starlight. Fur erupted along her arms, not brown or gray like most wolves, but pure silver that seemed to glow with inner light. The shift spread like quicksilver. Her spine extended, her shoulders broadened, her legs reformed into powerful haunches. Through it all, she felt only joy, only rightness. This was what she was meant to be. This was who she'd always been beneath the binding. Size was the last change, and it was dramatic. She grew, and grew, and grew. By the time the transformation completed, Alara stood on 4 paws in the center of the barn, and her head brushed the intact portion of the ceiling 15 feet above. She was massive, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, larger than should be possible. Her fur rippled with light like moonbeams on water, and when she looked down at her reflection in a puddle of melted snow, her eyes glowed pure white like twin moons. "Yes," her wolf said, satisfaction rich in her mental voice. "This is us. This is our truth." The 10 men of the Unchained Guard had all dropped to one knee, their heads bowed. But Kyle looked up, and tears streamed down his scarred face. "She is the matriarch," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The prophecy is fulfilled. The true Queen of Wolves stands before us." Alara wanted to speak, but in this form only a howl would emerge. So she threw back her massive head and sang to the sky, a sound of joy and rage and sorrow and triumph all woven together. The barn shook with it. Trees in the forest beyond bent away from the force of it, and miles away, in every pack for 100 miles, wolves stopped what they were doing and turned toward the sound, their instincts screaming that something fundamental had just changed in their world. When the howl faded, Alara shifted back. This transformation was just as smooth, just as painless, and when she stood on 2 feet again, the clothes that had been destroyed in her shift reformed around her, magic responding to her will without conscious thought. She felt different, stronger, whole. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked quietly. "Like I've been living underwater my whole life," Alara whispered, "and I just broke the surface." Over the next hour, Kyle and his men, her guard, she was beginning to understand, explained everything. The prophecy was ancient, written by a moon priestess 300 years ago when wolfkind had last been in crisis. There would come a time, she'd written, when the packs would forget the old ways, when strength would be valued over wisdom, when alphas would rule by fear rather than service, when the weak would be cast aside instead of protected. And in that darkest hour, the matriarch would be born, a wolf of ultimate power who would restore balance or watch everything fall. The Unchained Guard had formed in response to that prophecy. 10 wolves from 10 different packs, each one, swearing an oath to find and protect the matriarch when she finally emerged. They'd given up their pack bonds, become rogues by choice, and spent decades searching. "We knew some of the signs," said a massive man named Thorn, whose scent was leather and steel, and who bore more scars than even Kale. Born to a weak bloodline, marked by suffering, connected to the harvest moon. When we heard about an Omega in Silver Crest who'd been rejected by her mate during the harvest moon ceremony, we knew. "But the binding?" Alara asked. "How did you know about that?" "Your scent," Marcus explained. "All wolves have a natural scent, but yours was muffled, suppressed, like someone had wrapped you in cloth. It's a telltale sign of magical interference, especially when combined with your inability to shift." Kyle moved closer, his silver eyes serious. "Alara, we need to know the truth about your binding. We need to understand who did this, and why. Would you be willing to confront your parents?" Fear lanced through her. The idea of facing Mara and Thomas again, of demanding answers from the people who'd betrayed her so fundamentally. But she was no longer the powerless Omega who'd been cast out. She was something else now, something they should fear. Yes, she said. I need to know why. The journey back to Silver Crest took a day. Alara rode on Kale's back in his shifted form. He was massive, nearly as large as her own wolf form, with fur like midnight and those burning silver eyes. The other 9 ran with them, a pack of legendary wolves moving through the forest like shadows. They didn't approach the main pack lands. Instead, Kyle led them to a small cabin on the outskirts of the territory, Alara's childhood home. Her parents still lived there, having never risen above their low rank despite a lifetime of service. It was late afternoon when they arrived. Smoke rose from the chimney. Her parents were home. "Do you want us with you?" Kyle asked, having shifted back to human form along with the others. Alara considered, then shook her head. "Wait here. I need to do this alone." She walked to the door, on legs that didn't shake, wearing the confidence of her wolf-like armor. When she knocked, the sound was firm and commanding. Her mother opened the door. Mara Morven's face went white as snow when she saw who stood there. "Alara," she whispered, "but you should be..." "Dead?" Alara finished. "Yes, I imagine you thought I would be. Can I come in?" Mara stepped back numbly. Inside, Thomas sat at the small kitchen table, and his reaction was identical: shock, fear, and something that might have been guilt. "Hello, Papa," Alara said softly. "We need to talk about what you did to me." "We don't know what you mean," Thomas started, but his voice was weak. Alara let a fraction of her power leak into the room. The scent of moonlight and wildflowers grew thick enough to choke on, and both her parents stumbled back, their wolves instinctively recognizing a superior predator. "Don't lie to me," she said, and her voice carried harmonics now, her wolf speaking through her human throat. "You bound my power when I was a child, you crippled me, you turned me into something weak and easily discarded. I want to know why." Mara's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "We were afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of you," Thomas's voice broke. "Of what you were, what you'd become." The story came out in fragments, interrupted by sobs. When Alara was born, she'd been different from the start. Her eyes had glowed even as an infant. She'd called the smaller animals of the forest to her crib. When she cried, wolves for miles around had responded. The pack elders had been frightened, called her unnatural, demanded she be killed. "We couldn't let them hurt you," Mara wept, "but they wouldn't stop pushing. So we found a witch, a human witch who owed us a favor. She bound your power, made you seem normal, made you seem Omega. We thought if you were weak, you'd be safe. They wouldn't see you as a threat." "You chose their fear over my life," Alara said numbly. "You crippled your own daughter to make others comfortable." "We saved you," Thomas insisted, but there was no conviction in it. "You condemned me to a lifetime of suffering. Do you have any idea what it's been like? Being treated as worthless, being starved and beaten and cast aside, and all the while having this power locked inside me, clawing to get out." Alara's voice rose. "The rejection nearly killed me. Did you know that? I was dying in the snow, alone, and you turned away." "We're sorry," Mara sobbed. "We're so sorry. We thought we were protecting you." "Protection doesn't require betrayal." Alara looked at them both, these people who'd given her life and then taken everything that made it worth living. "The binding is broken. My wolf is free. And I am not the frightened child that you tried to shape me into." She turned to leave, but Thomas called out, "What are you going to do?" Alara paused in the doorway. "What I was always meant to do. I'm going to change everything, and you're going to have to live with what you've done." Outside, the unchained guard waited. Kyle searched her face and saw the truth there. He didn't ask questions, just pulled her into a hug that felt like coming home. "The binding is broken for good now," Marcus observed, scenting the air around her. "There's nothing holding your power back anymore." "Good," Alara said. "I'm going to need it." The next weeks were a blur of training and transformation. The Unchained Guard had a compound deep in the neutral territories between packlands, a fortress carved into a mountainside hidden by ancient magic. It became Alara's new home, and these 10 warriors became her family in ways her blood relatives had never been. Kyle taught her to control her shifting, to move between forms as easily as breathing. Thorn taught her combat, how to use her size and strength in battle. Marcus taught her to sense and manipulate the emotions of other wolves, a gift that came naturally when she learned to reach for it. Each member of the guard had their own specialty, their own lessons to share, but more than the training, they gave her belonging. They gave her purpose, gave her joy. She learned their names and stories: Thorn the warrior, Marcus the healer, Finn the tracker whose scent was earth and rain, Gareth the strategist who smelled of old parchment and ink, Ash the weapons master with his scent of forge fires and metal, 5 more: Rook, Silas, Drake, Cole, and Vesper, each one unique, each one sworn to her service not out of obligation, but out of belief. "Why me?" she asked Cale one night as they sat on the fortress walls watching the moon rise. "Why serve me?" His answer was simple: "Because you're what we need. Not just wolf kind. The world needs leaders who understand suffering, who choose compassion over cruelty, who've been broken and chose to heal rather than spread that brokenness. You were cast aside, Alara, but you didn't become bitter. Even now, even with all this power, you haven't sought revenge." "Yet," she said softly. Kyle smiled. "Yet. But when you do act, it will be justice, not vengeance. That's the difference." Days turned to weeks, and Alara felt herself changing in more than just power. She stood straighter, spoke with authority. Her scent grew stronger: lavender and morning dew and moonlight, a signature so potent that animals bowed when she passed and birds sang louder in her presence. And through it all, she felt Kyle's eyes on her, felt the connection growing between them, not a mate bond. The moon goddess had made her choice there, and it had failed. But something deeper, something chosen rather than fated. His scent of aged oak and winter snow made her feel safe. His presence made her stronger. One evening, as she practiced shifting for the 100th time that day, he called out, "Alara, we have company." She shifted back instantly, clothes reforming around her. A young wolf stood at the compound entrance, panting and wild-eyed, a scout from the neutral territories. "Matriarch!" he gasped, dropping to one knee. Word had spread fast about her presence. "I bring warning. Silver Crest is mobilizing. Alpha Daemon knows you're alive. He's gathering a war party." Alara's wolf stirred within her, eager and ready. "How many?" 25 warriors, maybe more." The scout's voice shook. "He's bringing Seraphina Frost as his second." Seraphina. The beautiful, cruel beta female who'd been Daemon's intended mate before the moon goddess had revealed Alara. A wolf whose scent was cinnamon and iron and blood, whose claws were said to be as sharp as her tongue. "They'll be here by dawn," the scout continued. "They mean to kill you, Matriarch, to end what they call an abomination." Kyle's hand went to the eye, sword at his hip. The other guards closed ranks around her, their eyes glowing with wolf light, ready to defend, ready to die if needed. But Alara stepped forward, and her voice was calm. "No one dies tomorrow. Not if I can help it. This ends without bloodshed." "Alara," Cale said carefully, "they're coming to kill you. You can't ask us to stand down." "I'm not asking you to stand down. I'm asking you to let me handle this my way." She met his silver eyes. "Trust me. Please." After a long moment, he nodded. "Always." The war party arrived with the sunrise. Alara stood alone in the valley before the fortress, wearing simple clothes and no armor. Behind her, hidden in the trees, the unchained guard waited. She'd made them promise not to interfere unless she called. 25 Silver Crest warriors emerged from the forest in wolf form, massive creatures of browns and grays, their eyes burning with aggression. At their head ran a wolf larger than the others, his fur black as pitch and his eyes ice blue. Daemon, and beside him a stunning red wolf with eyes like amber. Seraphina. They shifted as they approached. Daemon stood tall in human form, his body radiating dominance and fury. Seraphina's human form was just as beautiful. Long red hair, sharp features, a body built for violence wrapped in leathers and fur. "So," Daemon said, his voice carrying across the valley, "the Omega lives. How disappointing." "Hello, Daemon," Alara said softly. "Seraphina, everyone, you've come a long way." "We've come to correct a mistake," Seraphina purred, her scent of cinnamon and blood intensifying. "You should have died in that storm. Nature should have taken care of what mercy prevented. But don't worry, we'll finish what should have been done." Should it have been done? Alara asked. Should an innocent person die simply because she's inconvenient? Because she threatens your plans? You're no threat, Damon scoffed. You're an Omega, weak, powerless, the moon. Made a mistake bonding us, and I corrected it. Did you? Alara smiled, and it was sad. Damon, you made a mistake. You didn't just reject a mate, you rejected your destiny, and now you'll face what comes from that choice. Serafina laughed, sharp and cruel. Is the little Omega going to punish us? You and what army? I don't need an army. Alara's eyes began to glow white. I am the army. Serafina moved first, faster than thought, her shift instant and brutal. The red wolf launched herself at Alara with claws extended and jaws wide, aiming for the throat in a killing strike. Alara didn't shift. She didn't need to. She simply caught Serafina mid-air by the throat, her hand wrapping around fur and muscle, and the scent of moonlight exploded through the valley like a shockwave. Every wolf in Damon's war party stumbled. Their wolves, the primal creatures inside them, recognized what Alara was, what she'd always been, and they were terrified. Serafina struggled in Alara's grip, snarling and snapping, but she might as well have been fighting a mountain. Alara held her effortlessly, then with a casual flick of her wrist, threw the red wolf 50 feet through the air. Serafina crashed into the ground and didn't get up, stunned and whimpering. I didn't want this, Alara said, and her voice carried harmonics that made the trees shake. I wanted peace. I wanted to be left alone. But you came here intending murder. So now you'll see what you were so afraid of. She shifted. The transformation was instantaneous. One moment woman, the next a massive silver wolf that towered over every creature in the valley. Her eyes blazed like twin suns. Her fur rippled with power so tangible it warped the air around her. And her scent, lavender and moonlight and ancient strength, hit them like a physical blow. But she wasn't alone. From the trees emerged 10 wolves, each one legendary in size and bearing. The Unchained Guard revealed their true forms, and they were glorious. Not normal wolves, not even close. These were dire wolves from the old times, mythic guardians each blessed by the moon goddess herself. Kale's wolf form was silver and black, his eyes blazing, easily 3 times the size of Silvercrest's largest warrior. Damon's war party broke. Whimpers and whines filled the air. Several wolves pissed themselves in terror. Others dropped to their bellies, submitting to a superior predator. And Damon, proud, arrogant Alpha Damon Blackthorn, fell to his knees in human form, his head bowed, his entire body shaking. Mercy, he whispered. Please, mercy. Alara shifted back, standing over him in human form while her guard ringed them both, still in their massive wolf forms, a barrier that no one would cross. You showed me no mercy, she said quietly. You severed our bond in front of the entire pack. You humiliated me, cast me out to die, turned your back while I suffered. I know, Damon's voice cracked. I know, I was wrong. I was afraid. The elders, they said an Omega mate would weaken me, would make me look foolish. I should have been stronger, should have claimed you regardless. The moon goddess chose you, and I rejected her wisdom. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Behind him, his warriors were on their knees or bellies, every one of them in full submission. Serafina shifted back to human form, blood trickling from her mouth, her eyes wide with fear and something that might have been respect. I could kill you all, Alara said. It would be easy. It would even be just by pack law. You came here to kill me. Yes, Damon agreed. We did. You have every right. But I won't. Alara looked at each of them in turn. I won't because I'm not you. I don't punish weakness with death. I don't cast aside those who are inconvenient. I am what you should have been, Damon, what all alphas should be. I protect, I guide, I heal. She raised her voice so every wolf could hear. I am Alara Morven. I am the matriarch. This valley and all neutral territories are now under my protection. Any wolf, alpha, beta, omega, or rogue, who enters these lands seeking shelter will find it. Any wolf fleeing abuse or tyranny will be defended. I claim this as my territory and the Unchained Guard as my pack. And my first law as matriarch is this. No wolf will be judged by their designation alone. Strength comes in many forms. Value comes from character, not rank. Her eyes found Damon's again. You may return to Silver Crest. Tell your pack what you found here. Tell them what you learned. And if you're wise, you'll change how you rule. Because the old ways are coming back, and alphas who lead through fear will find themselves standing alone. Alara turned to Serafina. As for you, you attacked first. You struck with killing intent. For that, I strip you of your rank. You are Beta no more. Return to Silver Crest as Omega and learn what it means to walk in shoes you once mocked. Serafina's eyes widened in horror, but she bowed her head. Yes, matriarch. Go, Alara commanded. All of you. You have until sunset to be gone from my lands. They went. Damon's proud war party limped back into the forest like beaten dogs, their tails between their legs, their scents reeking of shame and fear. And when they were gone, Alara finally allowed herself to collapse. Kyle caught her, his arms strong and sure. The other guards shifted back, surrounding them both with warmth and pride, and love so fierce it brought tears to her eyes. You were magnificent, Kyle murmured against her hair. A true queen. I was terrified, she admitted. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. He pulled back to look at her, and in his silver eyes she saw everything she'd been searching for. Home, family, love. I know the bond didn't work out how the moon goddess planned, but if you'll have me, Alara Morven, I'd like to be yours by choice, not fate. Choice. Her heart swelled. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like a mate bond. It was better. It was chosen, earned, real. Around them, the unchained guard howled their approval, and the sound echoed across the valley like a promise, like a beginning. And so, Alara Morven's journey from powerless Omega to legendary matriarch was complete. She'd been rejected, cast out, left to die. She'd been bound and suppressed and taught to believe she was nothing. But the rejection shattered those chains. The suffering forged her into steel. And the love of her chosen family gave her the strength to rise. She learned that true power isn't about domination, it's about protection. She learned that strength comes not from what you're born with, but what you choose to become. And she learned that sometimes the greatest gift the universe can give you is watching those who underestimated you realize exactly how wrong they were. The prophecy was fulfilled. The matriarch had risen. And under her rule, Wolfkind would remember what it meant to value every member of the pack, from the strongest alpha to the most fragile omega. Because she'd been both, and she knew everyone deserves to be seen, everyone deserves to be protected, everyone deserves a place to belong. But this was just the beginning. Word of the matriarch spread across all pack territories. Some celebrated, some feared, and in the shadows, an ancient darkness stirred, something that had been waiting for the prophecy to be fulfilled, something that had plans of its own. The blood moon was coming, and with it, a test that would make Damon's war party look like child's play. But that's a story for another time. For now, Alara stood with her chosen mate and her sworn guard, looking out over the valley that was her new home. The sun set in brilliant colors, painting the sky in golds and purples. And for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be. She was no longer the rejected Omega. She was Alara Morven, the matriarch. And this was just the beginning of her reign. What did you think of Alara's journey from rejection to power? Have you ever felt underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and share it with someone who loves powerful transformations and epic comebacks. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter of Alara's story. Because, trust us, you won't want to miss what happens when the blood moon rises and ancient enemies emerge from the shadows. Thank you for listening to this chapter of the Matriarch's Tale. We'll see you in the next one, where the real battle begins.